Hi everybody, this is Noelle from Petitti's, and we are doing a plant spotlight on plants that have string of in their name. So there's lots of them. They're so fun and whimsical plants, and the majority of them are succulent types of plants. So whenever we do a plant spotlight, we want to make sure that you have all the basic information to take care of them and succeed with them, growing them inside your home. And whenever we say succulent or semi-succulent, it means they like warmer, drier conditions. So just keep that in your mind. All of these string of plants, except for one, sorry, they really come from Southern Africa. So again, just envision more of an African environment and you'll get it. You'll be able to grow them very, very well. So let's start out with light, because we always try to talk about light first. And really, most of these plants, these string of plants, because they're in the succulent family or grouping, they really do prefer a bright indirect light. So that's what I always say. It's a north-facing window, bright and open, but you're not getting direct sunlight through that window, or a diffused eastern, western, or southern exposure, or just a little ways away from that direct sun exposure through those windows, okay? So up to about 5 feet away from that window. And then they can actually take a little bit more light. So let's say you wanted to take these succulents outside during the growing season. So during the summer months, you can take them out, but I still wouldn't put them in direct sunlight. I would put them in a partially shaded area. So really about 4 hours of direct sun is probably the max. If not, you're going to be watering all the time. So again, 4 hours of direct sunlight all the way down to that bright light indirect position, okay? The next thing, of course, with temperatures and succulents is succulents, of course, they like the warmer temps. So you keep your thermostat a little bit warmer during the winter months. That's great. They can grow up to about 80 degrees. That's where they would like to be at their high end. At their low end, believe it or not, if you keep the home a little bit cooler or the office a little bit cooler, that's okay too. And I'm going to tell you that in the wintertime, if you keep the temperatures lower, and they can go down to about 50 degrees indoors. But if you keep those lower temperatures in your home or in the office while you're growing string of plants, what's going to happen is they will stay in a dormant state, and they will really be easy to care for as far as like watering is concerned. You rarely have to water them when they're at those lower temperatures. So something to keep in mind while you're growing them, but again, they can really take any of that, 50 all the way up to 80 degrees, they'll be fine. They'll be happy. Okay. Next thing, of course, is the watering. So again, even with succulents, we always say, water the plant thoroughly, and what you're doing is you're moistening the soil thoroughly, so everything gets moistened in the substrate, okay? And the water comes out the bottom of the drainage holes, okay, of that pot. You do that one more time. So you repeat, you water the substrate thoroughly. Now, most of these succulents, they're planted in cactus type soil mixes. So they're going to drain pretty quickly and dry out pretty quickly, but still a thorough watering is really key here. So twice, let that water drain out twice, and then go ahead and put the plant back in its spot. Most of these plants, these string of plants, they have very, very shallow root systems. So if you have them planted in a deep pot, let's say, with a lot of soil underneath them, and that soil stays moist, that's not a good condition. So most of the time you'll see these succulent type string of plants in more shallow pots, and even in terracotta pottery or unglazed ceramic pottery. The reason being is there's more air exchange through those pot walls, okay, and the base, and that provides more evaporation, more opportunities to evaporate. So when you see succulents planted in porous terracotta clay, that's why, because again, it increases the opportunity to evaporate, and so those plants aren't sitting in moisture, and that's always really key with succulents, okay? Humidity for these guys, It could be moderate household humidity, no problem whatsoever. Do they need to be spray misted? Really, they don't, okay? So humidity, you don't have to worry too much about these plants. However, whenever you have a high humid condition, you really don't have to water as often either, okay? So think about that when you are going through your watering tasks. Soil, as I mentioned, cactus soil or that type of really good draining soil mixture is very important anytime you're growing cactus or succulents, no problem, okay? So make sure that you do get that well-draining mix. If you want to add more, let's say, perlite or more coarse sand to that mix because you just feel like it's not draining good enough, that's fine. That's up to you. That's something that you can do additionally for these plants to be successful with them. The other thing that I should mention again is I mentioned about the pottery. So the drainage, the good draining soil, more shallow pots, more porous pots, those are all keys here to really doing very, very well with your succulents. And that's really for most succulents, okay? So string of kind of applies to that too. Okay, now fertilizer, again, with all your houseplants, majority of houseplants, I'll say there's a few that we could fertilize a little bit more often if we wanted to, but majority of the houseplants, they really don't need to be fertilized during the winter months. It's really only during the growing season. And when you're fertilizing these plants, it's usually a diluted form of the fertilizer. So lots of times we just suggest a multi-purpose fertilizer that works on a lot of different plants, but you're diluting it by 50% or 75%. They don't need a lot of food. And sometimes when you're applying that liquid fertilizer, it could burn their little shallow roots. So again, think about that. You don't really want them to grow that fast, right? And go out of control. So again, keep the fertilizer at a minimum and only during the growing season. Okay, so again, April through September is about right. Okay, maintenance-wise, other than your watering, your light, your fertilizer, your soil. So with these guys, they're really cool to propagate, and I love them. And you can trim them however long or short you want to. This is your classic string of pearls, so it is a green leaf, if you will. These are all modified leaves on these plants. They just produce that little pea or little bean there. And it's really interesting when you look at these, but they grow in Africa, they grow as a ground cover, okay? So they're under canopy trees, they're usually in a shadier area, and they just grow along the ground. And ever so often, they will root right there as they're sitting on the soil. So it's very easy to take a string of pearls like this and go ahead, you can loop the pearl up and loop it into the soil if you have a spot in that pot where there's empty soil, and you literally just lightly press those pearls into the soil so they're making contact, and continue to maintain the plant as you normally would. You can mist that area, keep that area just a little bit more moist, if you will, and humid, and they'll root within about 2 to 3 weeks typically. You can do that at any time. Once you've noticed that they've rooted, you can actually snip that branch. So now you have 2 branches of string of pearls, and actually where you cut the original branch, it should branch from there, okay? So again, you're creating a little bit more as far as propagating. Another thing that you can do is you can simply just take about a 3-inch section, go ahead and clip it. You can go ahead and take this section and go ahead and, again, just press it down to the top of pre-moistened cactus mix, okay? And again, spray mist ever so often, just when you're seeing that the top of the soil is drying out, spray mist lightly just to moisten it, and then you'll, again, see roots in about 2 to 3 weeks. One other way that you can do it, like we do a lot of cuttings and propagation, is you can remove your cutting again, that 3 inches or so, and then you're removing maybe 3 of the bottom leaves closest to that cut. And that way you're just going to make a little hole in the soil. Go ahead and put the stem where you cut those leaves off or took those leaves off, and it should root from those nodes as well. So 3 different ways to do it. all very, very easy. So again, propagation on this plant and pruning on this plant is really no issue whatsoever. There are some interesting features with string of pearls. They do produce flowers, believe it or not. The whole family is in the aster family, okay? And so they have this sort of white aster-like flower. It's sort of puffy, and they actually are supposed to smell like cinnamon. I haven't been able to smell them before. I really did not know this. So we tried to smell them earlier, Taylor and I, and we're not getting anything, but that's kind of what they look like. So she'll give you a close-up of those flowers. Another thing that you need to be mindful of with the string of pearls, or I should say the Senecio family or the Curio family, is that they are toxic, considered to be a toxic plant. So if you have people or pets around that get into plant material, this is not one that we would suggest for you. But if you don't have to worry about that, then this is a great plant to grow. There's so many fun string of plants out there. So we're going to walk you through it. Like I said, we've looked at string of pearls. This is Senecio Rollianus, and it's just, they're a gorgeous little plant. They have a little, like, almost looks like a slit in their little bead here in their pearl, but it's actually a window to let in some sunlight for photosynthesis. So that's kind of a neat thing to look for when you're looking at your string of pearls here. This one is your string of dolphins. Sometimes it's called hippogriff. So those Harry Potter fans out there, you might enjoy that. But as you look at these modified leaves, they really do look like jumping dolphins out of the water. They have a very similar flower as string of pearls does, but just a little bit different habit. So these are really fun ornamental plants, and again, just fun. Another one that we have here, this is actually string of watermelon. And I'll have Taylor try to show you when they get real mature, they get those nice dark green stripes on them and light green and dark green. So they really do look like watermelon. This is probably the most compact variety, meaning that it'll stay real close to the top of the pot, and then it will really only trail down to about a foot. They don't grow typically as long and vining as some of the other varieties, but really, really fun and much larger leaves, if you will. Now, I also have one more here, and I'm going to pull this out, and this kind of completes the Senecio or Curio family. This is Citriformis, or a string of teardrops or tears. Sometimes I've heard it called string of lemons. And this plant, the leaves, if you will, are very, very tapered at the ends, so hence the teardrop or even the lemon. But a little bit smaller leaves here on this plant, but again, very compact, maybe only growing about an inch tall. And then again, you get those really nice trailing strands. So there's lots of these types of plants, I should say Senecio varieties out there, very, very fun. But I've got a couple more that you may not know about. So let me hang these up. And the next one I wanted to show you is string of hearts, okay? So string of hearts, this is actually a really unique variety. This is a variegated string of hearts. And you can see that white, wide margin on the outside of the heart-shaped leaf, and it does turn pink too. It's really appropriate for Valentine's Day, actually. What you're going to find with string of hearts is they do come from South Africa as well. They are succulent as well. They produce little pink vase-shaped flowers, typically in the summer, so we don't see them on this one right now. And they also produce these little air tubers that you would use to divide and propagate more. So when you're growing on your string of hearts, and typically when they're more mature, that's when you're really going to see that tuber production. But look for those little tubers. At every node, they can root. They are not as easy to propagate as some of the ones in the Senecio family. So just keep that in mind, but keep on trying. So you can try to flip your vines back on, try to propagate them that way in some empty soil that you have at the top of the pot, or you can clip a cutting and go ahead and try to propagate them and root them on top of some cacti soil, again, pre-moistened. Okay, so keep in mind, this is a fun one, really, really pretty. Another one that I do have that not a lot of people know about, oh, I lost it, Taylor. Here we go. This is string of buttons, okay? And string of buttons is actually in the jade family, so this is a Crassula. And kind of neat here where all of their leaves are sort of triangular shaped and they're sort of stacked. So sometimes people call this the necklace plant as well. They'll grow up to about 6 inches or so, and then they'll start to trail over, and they make a very, very thick, you know, stem of different modified leaves. Again, in the jade family, they are considered a succulent. They like the same conditions. They come from South Africa again. So all the conditions that we were talking about earlier, this is always a great plant to try and kind of add to your string of collection. One other that I'm going to show you, this is the exception to the rule here. And this is string of turtles, okay? Now, string of turtles is kind of a semi-succulent plant. The reason being, this plant is from the Peperomia family. And Peperomias are actually native to South America, okay? More rainforest areas. So they don't necessarily want that bright direct light. Bright indirect, no problem whatsoever. So they'll do very, very well in those type of conditions. They can even take a medium indirect light. So further away from those bright windows, not a problem with string of turtles. The other thing with a string of turtles is that they are considered non-toxic. So they are safe for people and pets. So this might be one to consider if you do have pets that are curious about your plant material in your home. Excuse me. So this will work out very, very well. Same thing though, they do very nicely. They stay very tight to the top of the pot, trail down to about 2 feet long at maturity, and easy to propagate, no problem whatsoever. So consider this one as well. Really fun. Okay. So, Taylor, I forgot one, and I'm surprised Taylor didn't remind me. This is the variegated string of pearls. She's so pretty, very unusual. You can see kind of the creamy stripes through her pearls, but I will tell you that sometimes when they get a little bit more sunlight, you can see a little bit of a pink cast on there as well, but really, really ornamental and just beautiful. So have fun with your string of. Enjoy.